Michelle, welcome aboard to the show today. So happy to have you.
Thanks, Ari. Appreciate the.
So I noticed, and keep me honest here, that you won the basically President's Club, which is the best, one of the top salespeople in the organization. I think it was 8 times, if I counted correctly.
Mm.
And this leads me to ask, what is the difference between a salesperson that is consistently delivering and one that just doesn't get to that level?
Mm. Well, the selling environment in technology and specifically cybersecurity, which is the length of my career has been in that space, has changed quite a bit. It's evolved over the years. When I was making President's Club in back in the early 2000s, before the 2008 market crash, which I'm sure I'm dating myself by mentioning that. Um, yeah, it was very much relationship selling, and I'm very good at relationship, and I'm like you, much like you, I'm passionate about people's stories. I'm very interested and quite intrigued to hear where people come from, and I've always made it a point to get to know my clients pretty in depth, including their families and hobbies and whatnot. So I think that for me was a really big component to my success. And in many cases, I had developed relationships where, um, well, I'll give you an example. Intel was a major account for me, and I developed it from a very small revenue producing account to a worldwide global contract. And I did that not just by schlepping product, but by really understanding what the needs were. And in some cases, excuse me, recommending other products that I
Hmm.
couldn't even sell. And so I built a trust relationship with people that sort of transcended the typical client, representative relationship.
You called it relationship selling. What does that mean? What in that kind of deeper interaction with the customer drives the interaction?
Well, like I said, it's trust. I think that if you can gain the confidence of the buyer and really convey that you're not there just to sell, drop a product and run, or maybe be around for the renewal, but there's really not
Yeah.
much else. um, and really try to help your client understand where they may have overlaps in their product portfolio, that could could preempt them from buying something that they don't necessarily need, right? And it's that sort of trust development that I think makes the difference. And your clients will continue to call you back often, even at different companies. People move around quite a bit in this industry, and I can't tell you how many accounts I was walked into because of that. So.
I love that. The times where I had to tell, or not had to, I thought it was, I told customers, no, you don't need this, right? You talked a little bit about the overlaps in
Yeah.
portfolios. Like, actually, you don't need this, or this will not be a good fit for
Mm.
you. It's
Yeah.
such a trust builder because, you want to sell. And if a salesperson says you don't need this, that says something, I think, about them as a person.
You build credibility that way. I mentioned the evolution, though, that I saw in the kind of late 2000s and after the housing crash. It was interesting because there was this decoupling that took place in companies, and really relationship selling kind of had to take a back seat
Mm.
because procurement departments stepped in and they said, well, we know you have your favorite people that you like working with, technologists or practitioners, but that doesn't matter anymore. So we're going to do the relationship vetting. And so you found yourself having to sell to two parties in each account. So it became more burdensome, time consuming. The dynamics and politics changed quite a bit. So, yeah.
Do you find that in today's environment, relationship selling still has a place?
It does, yeah. Well, and so another evolution that we've seen is COVID and the advent of remote selling, right?
Right.
So um, even when people started going back to the office, in the few places where they did, it's very difficult to get a face-to-face meeting with a client now.
Right.
So nobody really wants to do it. So you find yourself doing a lot of virtual meetings. which makes it difficult for relationship selling.
Mm.
And, people have to eat lunch. You try to take them to lunch. Um, and it's really difficult to get people to move, get out and do things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my first sales experience, I had a $1 million deal to close,
Mhm.
and I was working, they were in a different country. So I was like, okay, I'm dating myself. I'll do Skype calls, and Zoom wasn't a thing yet. And I did all these Skype calls, and I said, look, I went to the CEO and I said, look, this is not going anywhere. And he said, okay, go visit them in Estonia. And I was like, but I mean, we're doing all this work virtually. What does it matter? And he said, if you want to send me on a free vacation, like, I'm in. And he said, yeah, just take him to dinner, have fun, and build a relationship.
Yeah.
What ended up happening is after I got back from that trip, we closed the deal within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was a huge, huge surprise for me. It's like, oh, having dinner
It,
with somebody and asking about their family, actually building a real relationship of trust actually does matter.
it
Um,
does. And that's a great example, Ari. A very good example.
it makes me wonder if there's if there needs to be new techniques and methods and ways to do that in today's much more virtual environment than it ever was before.
Well, buyers buy differently today too. They, often nobody wants to talk to a sales rep until they've
Mm.
download as many digital assets as they possibly could. So the onus is on companies really to serve up a lot of the information that generally would be delivered or previously would be delivered by a rep. Um, that's all got to be served up in the initial stages of the life cycle of the deal. So,
There's a maybe this is my own personal bias, but to me it feels like, and this is based on personal experience, buying GRC software. I talked to 5 different reps for 5 different companies, and it seemed like all the software is the same. I ultimately implemented one of those GRCs. I completely failed. Had to do the audit. This was ISO 27001. Had to do it on Excel sheets. I
mhm.
wanted I wanted to kill that company. I was like, the lies that I was told. Um, and then ultimately, then when I came to buy my next software, I ended up paying them for a whole year, even though I couldn't use the software. Bought the next software. My insistence was, I want to use the software from everyone for whatever 3 or 4 weeks to make sure it actually works. I don't believe anything people say to me in the sales process.
Yeah.
It, is this now becoming a thing that the salespeople don't know the products? What they're saying is just scripts that they're being told. How do we reestablish, if even there is a need for this? I'm coming from my own bias. Really reestablish trust between the sales force and the customers.
Such a good question. Well, in the realm of GRC, first of all, GRC technologies are only as good as the data that they're fed. So if there isn't enough information fed into them, you're not going to get the results that you're potentially seeking. Um, but most technology sales now are done as a result of a proof of value or proof of concept. It's referred to by both POC or POV acronyms. And there are companies that will go through that with clients. Others do sort of a freemium version of their product to give the clients the ability to kind of bang on it. But um, yeah, I think that it's a legitimate concern. It's a legitimate practice. And also, there are always so many. I mean, I think I heard a statistic that there are like something like 5,000 cybersecurity products in the market. I mean, it's
Crazy.
mind-boggling, right? And so trying to keep up with who's claiming what features and the legitimacy of those claims, I think is incredibly difficult for any client, right? Who has a day job, and it's not their job to go shop products. So,
Yeah. I really didn't want to do all that research until I was burnt once, right? It
yeah,
wasn't even on my agenda.
yeah.
So, from a star salesperson, President's Club, you moved into management.
Mhm.
What were the challenges when it goes from just doing a great sales job to actually managing other salespeople?
Yeah, well, hindsight is 2020, right?
2020.
Um, at the time, I was well. I'll back up a minute and give you a little bit about my background without boring you with too much detail. But I was grew up in New York, moved to the West Coast in my adolescent age, and essentially was raised by a single mother on a waitress wage. So I, very, very low income household. And we moved around quite a bit. I went to 14 schools growing up.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I had a good mother, but she worked a lot and we moved a lot. So when I was 15, I decided I didn't want to continue to move. I wanted to finish high school with my friends in the one place where we had stayed long enough for me to make friends. And so literally have been independent since I was 15, out of the house paying rent. So I finished high school and opted just to start working. I didn't go to college. I did some junior college general ed classes, but never completed a degree. So I essentially just jumped in with both feet and landed in sales. I had enough of a technical aptitude that I could pick it up, and um, have always been a really strong communicator, verbally and written. So that lent itself really nicely to, kind of propelling me. And so falling into technology allowed me to kind of navigate, into finding my way in my career into management. And I was also very ambitious. So back to your original question, I was approached for a district manager role and then VP, and then continued to grow from there. My last role with a GRC company was the chief revenue officer. So you can see sort of the trajectory that the my career took. The biggest challenge I had transitioning initially into management was having to manage my peers, some of whom were also very high performers. And so that was an interesting nuance, but I navigated it pretty well. And some of my closest friends were people that I worked with who eventually became people that worked for me and are pretty high performing sales reps themselves. Um, so that was probably the biggest challenge then. And then the other sort of personal challenge was I discovered pretty quickly that um, I was dependent on other people for my success, and that was new to me. I had always been sort of in control of my own destiny, and had really taken charge of that. And so that was very, very difficult for me.
What did you need to learn in order to be successful, considering it's not all you and these people were your peers a second ago? What did you have to change or do new?
I had to learn how to advocate for other people and
Mm.
not just focus on myself. That very much a team effort and selling bottom up. I should say performing bottom up in the organization. In a sales organization, particularly in a high tech company, and most importantly, in a high tech company with financing or some sort of investment funding, which is 99% of the time. Um, there's a it's a massive expectation. It's all about revenue, and things move at a rapid pace, and so you have to also be very conscientious of who's performing and who's not performing, and become laser focused on people's abilities and skill sets. So.
Okay. I have a curiosity. Every time I've been at one form of sales kickoff or another, everybody has a different name for it. These are these events that you're spending many times, many $1 million on a week, basically,
Mhm.
for a party slash education environment. What is your opinion on these events? Are they worth it? Do the salespeople appreciate them? Should we just cancel them altogether?
I think there's value in bringing people together from a peer and sort of cross pollination standpoint, where
Mm.
people can share ideas and strategies for how they're doing things in their region, what's going well and what's not going well. But I can't tell you how many kickoffs I've been to where it's just a giant party, and people aren't really there to be serious about business. So if they can be managed well and people can be, wrapped with guardrails and expectations set for what the outcome should be, I think they are very beneficial. But yeah, you have to manage salespeople pretty tightly.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
What when you looked at kind of measuring through the metrics, what was your approaches?
Data. Data is critical in terms of measurement. So historical data, looking back, projection data, and I mean, it's you can't do business without analyzing the data on a regular basis.
And let me dive into that. You know, you have a customer, region, salesperson, whatever. There's a forecast element to the success. So you're really successful if you hit exceed your forecast. How do you even approach that aspect of, well, this is what you need to hit? Does it make sense or not?
Well, looking at the historical data tells you typically what multiplier you need in terms of pipeline, overall pipeline, so top of funnel leads in, and then you analyze that based on close rates, the length of the deals, the number of days. There's a number of metrics that you use to analyze that, and you can then sit somebody down and say, okay, based on your region and the history, I can tell you that you need a 4x pipeline. You need 4x of what you have today. So let's talk about how we're going to get there, right? And then start creating campaigns to help generate the leads to fill the pipeline.
And if it's a 4x, I mean, that's huge. I mean, if you need to quadruple your revenue that you've done compared to last year, that's got to be an interesting discussion with the salesperson.
Let me clarify. Not a 4x revenue, but a 4x pipeline. So 25% close ratio or 20%. So they need to do a 5x pipeline.
Oh, meaning their close rate on leads coming into their
Yeah,
process. Got
exactly.
it. Got it. Where do you see, if at all, the pushback coming from the salespeople? Is it a negotiation, or is it more of a top down kind of thing?
Pushback is always, not enough leads.
Mm,
And there's that constant battle between marketing and sales.
right.
Marketing gets excited because they bring in 200 leads, but the reality is the quality,
Qualified.
you know, yeah.
What, how do you tell the truth? Like, is it a marketing issue? Is it a sales issue? Like, maybe it's a product issue. How do you kind of navigate that complexity of, throwing it over the wall? Who's at fault here? Then, oh,
Mhm.
we're not closing these deals because the leads that we're getting are not really qualified. They're not what we need. Or conversely, the sales team is not doing a good enough job. How do you even know what the truth is there?
Well, I think it's imperative on the rep to be able to qualify in or out very quickly.
Mm,
I've known a lot of reps, and I've been guilty of this myself in my early days of trying to work a lead that had no life in it, really, or talking to the wrong person, not finding the real champion in the opportunity, and just spinning your wheels with the wrong person. Um, and so that might have been what marketing called an SQL, sales qualified lead. But at the end of the day, if you don't do your job to truly get to the get to whether or not there's budget to be spent, or you have the right person to make the decision, that's a failure on your part as the rep. In terms of product deficiencies or bugs or things like that, I've always advocated for it's not our job to build the product; it's our job to sell the product. Um, I don't care if, and I'm not advocating for lying about a product, but um, we have smart people to solve those problems. And if there is a product issue, we get the right people involved, but it shouldn't be a deterrent to closing the deal.
fair enough.
Yeah.
Michelle, what would you advise the younger listeners that are kind of considering sales as a career opportunity? Is it right for them? How to be successful? Where to start? What would be your advice to somebody at the beginning of their journey?
Mm.
And let me ask something more pointed. Would you recommend, assuming you have kids, would you recommend your kids to go into sales?
Coincidentally, I have a son who's been in sales and loves it.
Ah, wonderful. So tell us the story.
Yeah. Well, to answer your first question, Ari, I would recommend it. But the advice I would give is you have to have thick skin.
Mm,
It's very much an emotional roller coaster, and you're only as good as, the next deal you close in organizations. So a lot of people think it's easy. and sales is not easy. Technology sales is not easy. Um, it, especially in large accounts, they're very complex, um, deals, and sometimes you've got a very democratic culture within an account where every part of the organization has to weigh in. Of course, that opens up lots of opinions and lots of input that could prolong the sales cycle, um, inject doubt and things like that. So it's a lot to navigate. And if you're not comfortable with dealing with people and dynamics and politics and knowing when to call in your executives to help, trying to take it all on yourself, um, and not asking for help, it can be a lot. And not everybody's can succeed at it.
This dynamic of, one day, one quarter you're a hero, you're the winner, you're the best, and the next quarter you're the worst, the loser. I'm assuming that's part of the thick skin that you were talking about. How do you even decide if that's the kind of environment that you want to be in?
I think people know, certainly managers know within, I'd say, the first 3 months if somebody's going to make it or not.
Mm,
And that there's a lot of rejection in sales, and getting to a place where you can, especially if you're dealing with cold leads, you can warm up a lead and an individual to the point where you know you uh, are in a position to make a friendship and build the relationship that we talked about early on. There's a long road there, right? But in the meantime, you're still having to advance the sale, answer the questions that they need from a product standpoint, and basically do all of your continued qualification while you're building that relationship. So, understanding the timeline, who's got the authority on the budget,
right.
all of those things, and making sure that your uh, primary champion isn't feeling like you're going to go above their head. Um, that it's just very nuanced.
It's always been amazing to me the importance of ego in the sales process.
Mm.
So you mentioned going above the champion's head. You said something quite incredible that a manager can kind of know within 3 months if the salesperson is going to be successful or not. Based on what is that? Well, what are the early signals that you can see in 3 months that give you such information?
I mean, any good sales manager is unpacking every opportunity with their rep
Mm,
and sitting down and going through and asking very scrutinizing questions about meetings or interactions that they're having with the customer, and you can deduce from that whether or not this person's going to have the chops to get it done.
what's the signals, the good signals and the bad signals that would indicate somebody's gonna make it or not?
um, Not taking no for an answer. If somebody says, that's not going to work for me, or what have you, a good sales rep is going to look for a way to um, create a problem or a need
Mm,
that the product can meet, right? Um, so, I've seen a lot of really creative reps that either are very good at establishing a need early, or avoid pricing discussions until very, very late in the sales process, which always preserves your revenue to the greatest degree. And so you're not discounting, you're not selling on price, right? You're establishing the value of the product um, to a degree that it doesn't really matter what the price is. Your customer is fully bought in. Those are the sorts of characteristics that you look for in a sales rep.
I've heard kind of conflicting opinions around not taking no for an answer, as opposed what I'll describe as a conflicting strategy, but keep me honest here on how you see it. Actually looking for the no, trying to figure out why this won't work in order to maybe build that trust with this isn't a good fit, and move on and not waste your time with the specific prospect. How do you see those? Do those conflict, or is there one strategy better or another, or is it actually the same thing?
What you're describing is semantics. That there's a phrase that gets used often, and People like to say no, actually. I don't know if you know this, but psychologically, buyers like to say no.
Hmm.
So if you can phrase your question in a way that allows them to say no, but continue to advance the sale, it's a good thing. So I'll give you an example. You're having a discussion with somebody, you're going through the details of the product, and at the end of it, you can say, is there any reason why we shouldn't move forward? And the guy says no. So it's just a slight difference in the phrasing.
Appreciate
But
that.
yeah.
Michelle, believe it or not, we're almost at the end of our time. We have only one scripted question here, and it's a difficult one because it's personal. If you had to go back to 20-something-year-old Michelle, what would you advise her?
Mm. I think so. I don't live my life by regret at all. I don't believe in regrets. I think that individuals make informed decisions in the moment, and you live with the consequences, good or bad. Um, but I think that I do carry one regret in my life, and that's not finishing school. So if I had to go back to my 20s, I would do that.
You able to get your son to do that?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, we have four kids as a blended family. So
4 kids.
yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. I've got 3, and I feel like I'm not sure I could handle one more. So my hat's off to you.
I love it. Yeah, it's a blast. I've recently transitioned, though. I don't know if you saw. I retired from technology.
Semi-retired, yeah.
Yep, loved it. It served me well. I made a ton of friends, great relationships, but I've decided to pursue my passion, and I've started an interior design firm, which is a
Oh
huge
wow.
future. Yeah,
Oh wow.
yeah,
That's quite the shift.
yeah.
Michelle, that is absolutely amazing. I'm gonna wish you a lot of good luck with the interior design firm. And the audience didn't hear this, but before we started talking, my first response was, "Oh, that's a wonderful background. I absolutely love it." So,
Thank you.
um, uh,
I mean,
I'm really
there's
excited for you.
parallels between technology and the design industry,
Oh
actually.
wow.
Yeah,
Michelle, here's what I'll offer. In a year or two, when you got your design firm set up, you got to come back and tell us the story.
I will. I will. I'd love to. Thanks, Ari.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.